Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 452. 452 days of unraveling this deep state coup. And we're making lots of progress lately, aren't we? June the 5th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, as you know, I try not to waste your time, so let's get right to it. As you know, today is Tuesday, and it's June the 5th, and that is the day that Bill Priestap is going to be testifying. Now, I'm about 99% sure that's a closed hearing, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to learn some things, and I expect that Nunes is going to learn a lot of things behind closed session, because Priestap is now no longer in that situation where he's going to sit there and clam up or plead the fifth or anything else. He is still in his position that he was always in, is the #1 man at FBI counterintelligence. And we can assume at this point that he has been working with Inspector General Horowitz, which means that he's probably already given up pretty much most of everything he knows. So telling Nunes, he's probably not going to be telling Nunes anything that Nunes is probably not going to learn once he actually gets into the IG report. Probably have to go over and view it in a SCIF because a lot of this stuff will be classified. But eventually, Priestap knows that Nunes and the people on his committee in the House Intelligence Committee, they are going to eventually find out the answers to the questions that they have for him. But it appears that he is being cooperative. So it shouldn't be too hard. That shouldn't be like pulling teeth. He shouldn't sit there and lie to them or refuse to answer questions. He should be fairly forthcoming. So, and it's a very, very important witness. Priestap is a very, very important witness. It does appear sometimes when you're looking at some of those Strzok and Page text that they're playing him a little bit. You know, like, it's almost like from some of those texts you get the feeling that the way Peter has been stroking us, that's Peter Strzok, for those of you who are new to my YouTube channel. And I say that because Peter's been stroking us. So, basically, what I'm saying here is that Bill Priestap was kind of kept in that situation. If you look at these texts where Priestap was kind of like kissing his butt a lot. Oh, hey, Bill, great job, Bill, thanks, Bill. You know, he was very, you know, I don't know, very overly friendly with Priestap when he was directly communicating with him. But when he was communicating with someone else other than Priestap about Priestap, his emails seemed to have a completely different tone. And you can get the impression that sometimes Peter's been stroking us would be deciding, well, do we want to run this by Bill, or is this one of the things that we don't tell Bill about? Now, whether or not that's the way Bill wanted it or not, I don't know. But clearly you can see that there was something going on there with that relationship with Priestap, with Peter's been stroking us, Andrew McCabe, Comey. It's like they had compartmentalized what information they would share with each other. And these, of course, are the top people at the Justice Department, the FBI Director, the Attorney General, the Assistant Attorney General, and the #1 person in counterintelligence, all kind of picking and choosing what they share with one another because they were running some sort of a plot. And, of course, there were power struggles going on and all sorts of things going on that we can see from reading those texts. But it's going to be a very important day today, and hopefully Priestap I'm not necessarily saying he's going to sit there and spill all the beans, but I'm saying he should probably be pretty forthcoming when he's questioned, and because he's already been probably thoroughly questioned by IG Horowitz, he's probably free to speak his mind, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He's going to be more free to speak his mind. I don't expect he's going to sit there and do a lot of cock blocking. So, anyway, hopefully something good will come out of that. I'm sure it will. We'll learn some things from this interview, and that's good. Now, yesterday was Monday, and of course we normally do Dumbass of the Week on Monday, but I just had so much to try to get into yesterday's video, I just couldn't take any time at all to do it. And it actually fits in nicely, though, with today to choose the Dumbass of the Week, because silly Sally Yates walked right into the nomination. It was a no-brainer for me. She didn't have that much competition this week, so it probably worked out for her. But I don't know how many of you caught this. It was just a few words that she said, but it's the words that she said. She was on the Morning Joe, and she was complaining to the Morning Joe about the fact that Trump has unprecedented. He's now investigating the investigators. And in the course of, venting to Morning Joe about what Trump is doing, she said that Trump was going to investigate the investigators because they were investigating his campaign. Because they were investigating his campaign. So we've just had the unwitting idiot James Clapper out there for the past 2 weeks, almost every day on some left-wing media outlet, telling those unwitting idiots in the left-wing media that he really doesn't like the word spy. He was on The View and he's like, yeah, well, do we have a spy in the Trump campaign? Well, I really don't like the word spy. It's, yeah, Jim, it's a pretty intrusive word, isn't it? But the fact of the matter is, Jim, and you know it, he was much more than a spy. He was an agent provocateur, which means that he was actually running operations. He was setting traps and planting false information to set people up in those traps. Jim, you unwitting idiot. So you got the unwitting idiot, James Clapper, the head-scratching, unwitting idiot, James Clapper. He's out there on The View and every other show completely denying that they were spying on the Trump campaign. He's been saying for the past 2 weeks, on every show he does, that they were spying on the Russians. But they put the spy into the Trump campaign, but their target was the Russians. But here today, we have silly Sally Yates telling Uncle Joe, that moron, telling Uncle Joe that she was upset because Trump was investigating the investigators, the people who were investigating his campaign. Silly Sally completely refuting what Clapper was saying. Clapper saying they weren't investigating the Trump campaign. They were investigating Russians. Well, here we have Silly Sally telling the Morning Joe that they were investigating the Trump campaign. These people should never be going on TV and talking because they just keep tripping themselves up. And let's keep in mind, it was both Clapper and Yates who testified together in Congress, and both admitted that they unmasked Trump campaign team members. They wouldn't specifically say who or how often or anything else, but we now know. It was hundreds of times, and it was many, many, many people. Many people, over 100. So, Sally Yates, for sticking her foot in her mouth and making that comment, completely refuting what the unwitting idiot Clapper has been saying, is in fact our de facto dumbass of the week. Congratulations, Silly Sally. Lawyer up. Now, I want to, as you know, the last couple days since I rediscovered and am looking in a different way at this 6-agency special task force and starting to realize that this is really the root. This is really where everything was happening. So I'm now on a full court press to get this out there. I'm a pretty small YouTuber, but this needs to be investigated by Paul Sherry, by Sarah Carter, by Chuck Ross, by Last Refuge, all these really good investigators who have a lot more reach than I have, particularly Joe DeGeneva, who I believe occasionally watches my YouTube channel. This is where everyone needs to do their focus, really sharpen their focus and look here. Because if you just keep looking at the DOJ and the FBI, even Nunes now looking at the State Department, they were involved. But what you're going to get is little pieces of things that you're going to have, nearly impossible going to be to piece everything together because so much of it wasn't being ran within those departments. It was actually people from, 1 or 2 people, top level people from those agencies that were in this 6-agency operation being run in secret out of Langley, Virginia at the CIA headquarters by John Brennan. And that is where you're going to find all the evidence. Now, they probably don't keep a lot of documents there, but if you can identify, first of all, establish that, in fact, when was this agency set up and why, and who were the people who were members of it. We know Clapper and Brennan and Peters Ben Strokinus were members of that group. It's key that you start at the root, if you can, and work your way out. Now, normally you have to work your way out from the outside and work your way in to find the root, which is what we've been doing. But once you do that, then you can start digging for evidence. Right now, when you're working from the peripheral, working your way in to solve the crime, you don't even know what documents you need to see. You just don't know, because there's so many unanswered questions. You're just trying to work yourself to find out where the root is. But once you find where the root is, then you can kind of see the whole plot as it played itself out and who was involved. Then you know specifically what documents you need to get. So a lot of these documents, while they probably didn't keep many documents there in Langley or keep paper trails of what they were doing, all these people in that 6-agency group came from other agencies. So knowing that, once you know what was going on there, it'll help you when you're requesting documents, specific documents, to know exactly what documents you need to see. Because remember, we're talking about millions and millions of documents. And the way it works is Congress does have oversight, but they can't just go into the DOJ or FBI and say, yeah, we want to see every document you created from 2015 to 2017. It doesn't work that way. They have to actually, Nunes or Goodlatte or whoever, they have to actually give a reason why they want to see the document. They have to give a specific reason for it, and they really need to know specifically what documents from what departments that they really need to target for those documents to see. And this, if they will focus their attention right now on this 6-agency task force, it will really help to hone in on exactly what individuals they need to look at and what documents they need to specifically request. This is why this morning I placed a call to the office of Devin Nunes in Washington, D.C. I tried to see if they would put me on with one of his investigators. Unfortunately, I was not able to get that done, but I did have about a 7-8 minute conversation with one of his aides, and I made it perfectly clear that they need to start looking at this 6-agency task force. I asked this person in a very forceful way, you might say, to promise me that they would make sure that this information gets to Devin Nunes' investigators. And the person listened very carefully and agreed and said, yeah, that's very interesting information, and I think they probably would want to look at that. And I said, please tell them, make sure to start focusing really, really hard on this group inside the CIA that Brennan set up. I think that that's where you really need to focus, and I think it will open up a lot of doors for you. And I think it will help you get the right documents and really understand, because Nunes wants to find the origin of the investigation. He can't find it in the EC. He can't find it in any of the foreign intelligence that he's looked at. So he's looked everywhere. He can't find the origin. Hey, Devin, take a peek inside that 6-agency intel group there, and I think that you'll find a lot of the questions or a lot of the answers that you're looking for. So I did make the phone call. Hopefully Devin Nunes' investigators will get my message that they need to really focus like a hawk on this 6-agency task force, because that is where the operation was being run. That was where that's the brain center of the operation. The FBI counterintelligence operation, of course, served a very important purpose, because they are the ones that have to get the warrants to do the surveillance, because the CIA is not permitted to run surveillance on American citizens in the U.S. Now, if they're outside the U.S., then they can be caught up in the CIA's surveillance. But inside the United States, they are not permitted. The CIA is not permitted to conduct surveillance inside the United States. They are a foreign intelligence agency. And that's why they had to bring in Peter's been stroking us. And if you'll notice, they also had the State Department and the DOJ representatives in this group. And that's because they also needed to have the people who could draw up the warrants for the FISA surveillance and draw up any charges or anything else. That's done at the DOJ. That's why they had to have a DOJ person there as well. So they had CIA, State Department, NSA, DOJ, all in there, because they all had a specific purpose as part of this task force to pull off the caper, you might say, which has now been unearthed. And I will keep pushing this as hard as I can. I want this to be the most talked about thing on the internet and in this entire scam in the next week to 10 days. I want everybody, Hannity, Tucker Carlson, all these journalists, I want them all focusing really, really hard, because I'm telling you, this is, in my opinion, where we are going to find the real root and where this thing all began. And once you can identify that and get those people and target those people and know which documents you need, it will open up a lot of doors, and that Devin Nunes won't be scratching his head wondering where this thing all started, where that intelligence got started. It came from the CIA, manufactured, working with their friends across the pond, Mr. Dearlove and Mr. Hannigan, creating the false intel that will be used to pass along to the FBI. It was a gigantic frame-up, Mr. Nunes. And I know you know that, and I know you're a good guy, and you're on the right team, but you got a lot of things going on. I'm just a guy out here in the wilderness shouting at you, take a look, sir. And I think you'll find what you're looking for. Now, I am going to move forward from this point to the rest of the video with covering some things that are, a couple things that are new, but quite a few things we've heard before over the past year or so. But now, a lot of times, things that, a year ago, like when we first heard a year ago, that Brennan went sat right there and told Chuck Todd, yeah, why set up this special task force with 6 agencies? Well, back in, last year in 2017, early 2017, that didn't really mean a lot to anybody. We're just like, okay, well, yeah, the CIA was spying too. But no, it was much more than that. So now that we have the information we have today, and we can go back and look at it in hindsight, we can see the significance of that. It's much more important today because we have a different context, because we have more information, more facts have come to light, and now we have a different perspective on the situation. So I'm going to go through some things. There are some new things and some old things. And the old things are things that we now have a different perspective on, that we talked about 6 or 8 months ago, that we've stopped talking about because we thought they weren't important anymore. But now we can see that they're really important. So what I'm going to be giving you is excerpts, statements, and little quotes and things from primarily, it's actually a story that was written by Harley Schenger in Rogue Money, but he was using as his source for a lot of his information Paul Wood of the BBC, who did that big expose back in January of 2017. So this is a lot of what Harley Schenger is saying about from the Paul Wood article, which was a dandy. And there's a few other journalists who also had some things in here that I'm going to bring to light, and we're just going to go through these infinitum. And so you can kind of see how we arrive at the point where we're at today, where we really need to start looking at that 6 agencies. So these are some of the things that make the case for that particular course of action. Alrighty. We are told that Halper, the fat man, was the FBI informant. They haven't admitted to that publicly, and they won't unredact the name for Devin Nunes, but we know it was Halper. And we know that we're being told by people on the peripheral that he was an FBI informant. But he may have started working for the FBI after Peter's been stroking us and Priestap and those guys went over to London and met with Halper and met with probably Miss Smith and met with maybe Boris and the other folks over there. But prior to that, he was CIA. But if you look at the history of Mr. Halper, his background is not as being an informant for the FBI. His background is his very close association with the CIA and the MI6 for 30, 40 years. That's been his association, not really the FBI. He came over, I think, Brennan probably told Peter's been stroking us, hey, we got our guy on the inside, our informant. And so when you go over to London, we'll help you to make contact with him, and he can start, helping you. He's been doing this stuff for us, but now he can provide for you as well. So I think that the FBI kind of inherited Halper once Peter's been stroking us and Bill Priestap made that trip over to England, I think. But prior to that, and if you look at the history of Mr. Halper, his history shows his connections are to CIA and MI6. And that Halper's role, the main role of Halper in the plot, the Fat Man, was apparently to have been to plant fake evidence and orchestrate traps. He planted the fake evidence to set the trap for his mark, which was, in this case, Papagalopoulos, and to some extent, Carter Page. We know that Bruce Orr was told by Christopher Steele. He met with him twice, and Bruce Orr has stated that Christopher Steele told him that, quote, he and his friends in the UK were desperate to stop Trump from being elected. That's something we've already known, but it takes on a different meaning now. So, next we have George Neumeyer, who stated in his article on May 22nd, 2017, just about a week ago, reported in an article that John Brennan said that his 6-agency task force was set into action because he felt that Trump was putting the special relationship with the British at risk. The details of this operation will not be found at the FBI, only bits and pieces. The whole chunks of this operation will only be found with the Obama White House, Obama's CIA, and the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, the Treasury Department, and the State Department, probably also with MI6 and GCHQ. That is where all the real information will be, in that second, third, fourth layer underneath the cover layer that the CIA and intelligence agencies always do multi-layered operations. The first couple layers are to throw you off. That's why I know these things are distractions. But the real operation was being run there by Brennan at the CIA. Everything else was the cover operations, and to provide what the FBI can provide that the CIA cannot, which is surveillance warrants and things and such. Gina Haspel, our new CIA director. She needs to come clean. Did you know that Gina Haspel was the CIA station chief in London during the entire 2014 to 2017 time period? Haspel had to be either one of two things: a key player in the operation, which means she's guilty, or she didn't know a thing that was going on right underneath her nose, which means she's too incompetent to be the CIA director. You can't be the chief spy when everything that was going on right underneath your nose was happening and you didn't know about it. And why do you think it was Gina Haspel that was so quickly appointed, as if there was no one else even to consider, to be the new CIA director? Do you think it might have something to do with what Gina Haspel knows? What Gina Haspel was taking a part in? It's awfully convenient that she was the CIA station chief in London when all this was going down, and then suddenly she emerges as a top-tier candidate for CIA director and gets confirmed. In October 2016, the FBI had told Steele that they had an informant in the Trump campaign, something that they never, ever, ever do. In fact, they will not give up the name to the House Intelligence Committee. They will not give it up to Bob Goodlatte or Trey Gowdy, who has oversight. They will not let them get anywhere near it. They will not let them see the document or the unredacted name. They just absolutely refuse to do it. But they had no problem passing it on to Christopher Steele, a former British agent who's a foreigner, not even an American citizen, not even part of the FBI, an informant who they cut ties with because he slit their throat by going out and talking to the media when they told him not to. And he had no problem sharing that with Glenn Simpson, and he shared it with the Congress. That's why we know about it. Glenn Simpson told the committee that was interviewing him that Christopher Steele told him that they had an informant inside the Trump campaign. And he said that it was the FBI that told him that. So they'll tell Christopher Steele all about the informant, but they won't tell Devin Nunes and all of us? I wonder why. Steele did not go directly to the FBI on this particular case with the dossier. He actually went to Nuland, Victoria F. the EU Nuland, using Jonathan Weiner, a Clinton confidant, as the intermediary. And it was from there that it made its way to John Kerry, and then apparently from Kerry passed on to the FBI. Keep in mind, Jonathan Weiner came out of Hillary Clinton's State Department. He's a longtime Clinton acolyte, one of her partisans, one of her demented disciples, no doubt. Mr. Jonathan Weiner was the intermediary. Weiner was also the intermediary that gave the Cody Shearer dossier directly to Christopher Steele. Cody Shear, also one of the demented disciples of the rotten Reverend Clinton. The main focus of the dossier, of course, was on Carter Page, who was immediately targeted by Halper within 3 days of his arrival in London after he gave the speech in Moscow, which he did report to the Trump campaign in advance that he was going to be giving this speech in Moscow. He ran it by Sessions and 3 or 4 other people, and they said, yeah, okay, well, that's fine. It's an economic speech in Moscow. Okay, it's public speech, not backdoor or anything. Wide open public speech. Okay, don't worry about it. Go ahead and do it. So, nothing to hide there. They weren't trying to hide anything. Carter Page was very open. You know, you could read about it in the newspaper. That's where Nellie Orr got it, from that open source reading the newspaper to find background material to help fill in the gaps for the setup. The FBI bases its investigation on the Papadopoulos Downer meeting, as if it were an isolated event. But it was not. It was part of a much larger operation. Halper, Downer, and Mifsud, the professor, were all part of this entrapment plot, and it's blatantly obvious. So yes, they do try to, they try to isolate this and say, well, it was this Papadopoulos met with Downer. How peculiar. He meets with this, they forget to tell you that it was Downer that called for the meeting. Why would a high-level former ambassador at that time reach out to this guy Papadopoulos? How did he even know Papadopoulos? Well, we know how that happened, but you can see it was clearly all a setup. Even Barney Fife could sniff this one out. Papadopoulos was fed the lie by the professor, source B in the dossier, which he denies, Joseph Misford, only 6 weeks after joining the campaign. So you can see that he was only in the campaign for 6 weeks. Hardly the type of person that would have been selected as the one to receive such damning information. Misford was cast as a Russian spy. That's what Mueller tells us, Uncle Bob the Executioner. That's what the FBI tells us. That's what the media tries to tell us, that he was connections to Russians and he may have been a Russian spy. No! Look at his entire history. His connections, Mr. Misford's connections, are much closer to that of a British agent or a British asset in British intelligence. Then we have Halper, who met with Carter Page at the Cambridge seminar. Christopher Steele was at that function. Remember, Madeline Halfbright was one of the guest speakers. And according to some accounts, Christopher Steele was seated right behind Carter Page. And then, shortly thereafter, within like 2 or 3 weeks, Steele's first memo comes out, June the 20th, and it's mostly about Page's trip to Moscow. Then, of course, we have the email from Rob Goldstone to Don Trump Jr., where he clearly states in the body of the message that he wanted to set up a meeting with a Russian lawyer that would deliver dirt on the rotten Reverend Clinton, straight from a prosecutor in Russia. This fake evidence trail will be used for future purposes to entrap the Trump campaign officials. Yeah, so Rob Goldstone, another one of them guys that disappeared after his name popped up, and apparently he went on a tour of gay bathhouses in Europe and laid low for 6 months. God knows what's going on in that guy's world. But anyway, yeah, clearly the body of the email. Yeah, hey, how would you like some dirt on Hillary Clinton from a Russian, high-level Russian intelligence officer? Yeah, that's real stealth, Rob. Way to go, pal. Such a setup. These are obvious setups, are they not? I mean, like I said, Barney Fife, Deputy Dog, Underdog, and Polly Purebred could sniff these out. Here he comes to save the day. Yeah. Bill Browder, also a British intelligence asset, made sure that the meeting at the Trump Tower would be scrutinized and talked about and made public, because he filed a complaint with the Justice Department that the meeting violated the Foreign Registration Act. Another part of the setup. William Binney, the former technical director of the NSA, has stated, and he's said this to Mike Pompeo personally, on multiple occasions, Binney has stated that the NSA monitors all internet activity throughout the world and would be able to document and demonstrate the alleged Russian hack and any internet transmission or file transfer of the DNC files to WikiLeaks. We do not need the DNC servers. Just a trip over to the NSA. Are you listening, Mr. Nunes, my good friend? That's right. The transfer of the files, if it was really the Russians, would have been done over the internet. And that means that the NSA monitors every file transfer over the internet. They got it all. BleachBit won't help in this case. That's why they wouldn't go look at them servers. If we get a real special counsel who's real serious about solving this crime, that's the first place he'll start. And that takes us down what road? Takes us down the road to Seth Rich. The CIA's Marble Framework, which was exposed by WikiLeaks, part of the Vault 7 release, allows the CIA to create false flag cyber attacks by planting false signatures of behavior in order to attribute cyber attacks to other countries. That's why they want Julian Assange hanging from a tree. CrowdStrike. Mr. Alperovich gave us the narrative that the Russians hacked the DNC server. They were brought in, we're told they were brought in April 30th of 2016, but we believe it was earlier. Then he comes out 2 weeks later, after examining those server logs, and says it was the Russians. That's Mr. Alperovich. Of course, we know that he is a Putin hater, an Atlanticist, paid for by the Rotten Reverend Clinton campaign in the DNC versus Mark Elias, who's the attorney for both. He, of course, as I said, he's part of the Atlantic Council. He is part of the Atlantic Council, and the Atlantic Council is part of NATO's Center for Strategic Communications, which is run by who? British intelligence. Sources to Paul Wood of the BBC were saying that John Brennan began organizing the 6 agencies task force as early as early spring of 2016, months earlier than previously believed. No later than March 2016. The 6 agency task force is illegal, by the way. It is illegal for the CIA to spy on American citizens, even if they're using a foreign intelligence agency to do the surveillance. Halper and Richard Dearlove are close friends over many years. Dearlove was Steele's boss, as well as Steele's partner, Chris Burrows. Dearlove is, of course, known for providing the false intelligence to the Bush administration that was the tripwire for the Iraq War. The fat man, Mr. Halper, in the past 6 years, earned over $1 million working on contracts for the Pentagon's Office of Net Assessment. Halper, Downer, and Dearlove are all share close connections to Hackloot. Hackloot is a private intelligence firm and is known to be, or joked about as being, a retirement home for spies formerly with MI6. Then, of course, we have Mr. Mifsud, the professor, source B in the dossier, also the one who supposedly whispered in the ear of Papadopoulos about stolen Russian emails. We have the professor, the Maltese horse whisperer, who also has ties to British intelligence, including to Claire Smith, who is the person in the UK who vets all spies in the UK, as well as Boris Johnson, and he admits to being a member of only one organization, and that is the Clinton Foundation. Says he's a member, even though you really can't be a member of the Clinton Foundation. Finally, Papadopoulos' wife, Simona Mangiante, is now out on the media circuit herself. She was just on Tucker Carlson. She said that her husband pled guilty to charges of making false statements because he was threatened that he would be charged as a foreign agent of the Israeli government. She also says her husband had no role in Trump-Russia collusion. Well, he had a role in it, but he was not a part of the plot, probably. Most likely, he was set up in a trap by Mr. Halper, the fat man, and his buddies. And the CIA 6-agency task force, we now have confirmation of exactly who those 6 agencies were: the FBI, the CIA, the DOJ, Treasury, Department of the Treasury, the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, and the NSA. Well, continue to spread this term far and wide on all your social media. We need to get this on the tip of everybody's tongue. CIA, Secret Six Agency Task Force. It needs to be all that anybody's talking about until we get the investigators pointing that direction and digging it out. Because that's where the bones are buried, my friends. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good day. Bye.